That clip that you just heard and saw melted hearts around the world. It went viral last Sunday night. The first hugs and indescribably joyful reunion between 3 Israeli women who had been held hostage by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. Back in Israel last Sunday night. Extraordinary. And we now go to a discussion with the great Yaakov Katz and me that just took place yesterday. We talk about that hostage deal, that horrible, crappy hostage deal that we just had to have. And we talk about the IDF Chief of Staff stepping down and so much more. So stick around, stay with us. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, and now podcasting. Thanks for being here. Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. Wonderful to see you. How are you, Yaakov?
All considered, doing well. Good to be with you, Viv.
Wonderful to be with you. And we have a lot to talk about. Thank you for making time because I know you've been running around today. But let's go. It's been a crazy week. We were chatting very briefly before I turned on all the machines about your great column on Friday. It was really, really good.
Thank you.
And you were wrestling with all of the same stuff that we all are, which is the crappy deal for the return of hostages that we need, but it's horrible. So, just kind of put it in a little box for our viewers and listeners. And then we're going to move on to all the excitement that's boiling up this week.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, basically, and I wrote this piece before the actual hostages were released, and to me, it just kind of reinforced to a great extent what I thought and believe. But essentially, this is a bad deal, right? And that has to be said. It's a bad deal because just 3 quick reasons. One, we're not getting everyone back right away. I mean, we're getting now 33 in stage 1. There's still 65 that will be left behind. Will they even come back? Will there be a stage 2? I'm not even getting into the fact of, we got 3, Daron, Romy, and Emily on Sunday. Amazing. I mean, your heart just pours when you saw, when we all watched and saw. There wasn't a dry eye probably in this country and probably in a lot of places around the world at that same time. But that was just 3. I mean, so now next Sunday, we're supposed to get another, 3 or 4, and then every Sunday, another batch. But you and I both know so much can go wrong here in the Middle East, in this region, in the dynamic between Israel and Hamas, that the deal could fall apart. And then what? So the fact that this is structured in such a way, I think is a big flaw. I think what it also does, and this is the second problem, and we saw this on Sunday, there are Hamas fighters who are still in Gaza. I mean, yeah, anyone could just put a green band around their forehead and claim that they're a Hamas fighter, but there are still hundreds and probably thousands of Hamas fighters today in Gaza. They still have fighters, they have infrastructure, they have weapons. So what have we done for the last 15 months? And it kind of leaves a feeling that where is the win and the victory that we were after for so long since October 7th and that massacre against the state of Israel? The third part of it, and here is just the politics of everything, is that again, this is just thrown into political, mud. You have people like Bezalel Smotrich, who votes against the deal and gets apparently some sort of assurance from Prime Minister Netanyahu that we are going to renew the war, when the first stage is over. So if we're going to renew the war when the first stage is over, what happens to the rest of the hostages who are waiting for stage 2? So this whole thing, this whole situation is just not good. Of course, we can't trust Hamas. They're the last people we could trust. We are a country governed by rule of law. We decide something, we approve the deal in the cabinet, in government, goes through the courts, whatever it is, it's locked and loaded. Hamas says, okay, we're good today, but tomorrow, you know what? We changed our mind. It's lopsided. It's unbalanced.
Well, there's a lot that's unbalanced. But before we go on, I want to just, 2 points. One is, I guess I have to, the next groups of hostages are not going to be released on Sundays. It's going to be on Shabbat.
Saturday.
It's on Saturday.
Thank you.
And they are, I believe, from what we know, is that first it's those who are alive and female. Now, it was always, initially they were saying children, and there are only 2 children still in captivity. And since they haven't been released, we're kind of left speculating and making certain assumptions. This week, I think, based on what I've heard and read, is that it's going to be 4 women, one of whom was supposed to have been released in November 23, 3 of the IDF female soldiers. Whether they're all alive or not, we just don't know. And we certainly have no idea what their condition is going to be. In terms of, the opportunities, yes, there are a million variables that could, skid, right? And there were things that skidded last week. Hamas giving us the names 18 hours after they were supposed to, the ceasefire coming into effect late, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. At the end of the day, thank goodness we got those 3 back. But there's another issue I'd also like to you to comment on that I ask everybody, and I've yet to receive what I think is a good explanation. Nothing personal. It's not about you. We always agree to these insanely lopsided ratios. Why?
Well, I mean, people say it's kind of like the question, why didn't we insist on getting everyone back, right? Well, because they didn't agree. I mean, listen, they understand our vulnerability. They understand our weakness. Let me ask you another question, Vivian. Okay. In what world do you know?
What phase, Yaakov? I'm going to ask that question, and I'm going to get a great, good answer.
No, I don't. By the way, I don't have the answer. Is that this is the way it works, and this is what they demand of us. No, but I'm going to ask you. Let me ask you a different question.
Sure.
98 hostages. Okay. Israel has already declared how many dead? 30 something, right? That Israel has said we know definitively that they're dead. We have evidence, whether it's DNA, intelligence, video evidence, whatever it is, we know that they're dead and their bodies are being held there. In what world do you know that dead bodies are considered hostages? Or bodies. I mean, what does it mean, dead bodies? Bodies are considered hostages. I don't know that. I mean, there's a hostage, there's a person being held who's alive against her or his will. And then there's a body. Now, why in the deal? By the way, you read the text of the deal. It doesn't make a differentiation or distinction between bodies and alive people. What? I mean, this whole deal is flawed at the core. And with that said, it was right to do it, and we need it. And if you had any doubts, and I personally didn't, I know that you didn't, but if you had any doubts before Sunday, when you watched those 3 women come home, hug their mothers, come back to Israel, hug their mothers, that was enough for you to understand there are people who are alive that have been let down by their country. We failed, whether they were soldiers or they were people sleeping in their beds at 6:29 in the morning, or people who had gone to a festival, and we let them down and they were taken by a terrorist organization. We have to bring them back. And we have to bring them back for 2 primary reasons. One is because we owe it to them. But 2, we will never be able to heal as a nation.
Totally
agree. Be able to overcome the scar that we all carry on our hearts wear on our hearts since October 7th. We will not be able to heal as long as our people languish in Hamas captivity. And for that reason, We need to get all of them home. So this journey is far from over. We're in a good direction right now, and we can live to fight another day against Hamas. But these people don't have another day. They might not even have another minute. And we know that as time passes, more and more are being lost. So we have to do everything we can to bring them home.
You know what surprised me is that once they were out, actually even before, on Channel 12, the Israeli news channel that is the most watched in the country, Saturday night, it's always a big kind of, yelling fest. And it was one guest after another. And Amit Segal is one of the most senior political analysts in the country, and he's one of their main guys. And he clearly does not support the deal. And a guest after guest who was kind of saying, look, it sucks, but the same way that you and I speak about it. So then they had Yaakov Amidror, who's a general, retired general. He's, someone with
And was Netanyahu's national security advisor.
Was his national security advisor, and I think is someone who remains on speed dial. That's complete speculation on my part, but he's so highly regarded by everyone. It's not about politics, but we all know his politics. They lean to the right. So they had Amidror on after Shabbat, standing in his garden in front of some fruit tree. And Amit Segal, you could see the excitement on his face. He's like, before we get into anything, just tell me, if you were in the room, would you have signed the deal? And Amidror said with a heavy heart, yes. And Amit Segal was deflated. And the reason I indulge in telling that little story is because I think that if Amidror thinks that we needed that deal, as crappy as it is, that's really significant. And there are others, in my view, since Sunday, when we saw these young women come home, who have kind of shifted, who were against it on Friday and Saturday. And as you mentioned, it's that healing. This country cannot move forward. We can't stand with real kind of, pride, in my view, if we don't honor the ethos of bring everyone back.
By the way, 100%. I mean, I'll just add to that. It doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that about Yaakov Amidror, but it doesn't surprise me because I think what also people recognized to some extent at this point, so deep into this conflict, 15 months, almost 16 months later, is that this whole concept of total victory that we had been sold to us was, I think there was to some extent the mistake. Our leaders needed to be more transparent and honest with us of what victory was meant to look like. And you see, the problem with this war was that from the beginning, there was never going to be a total victory. Now, I've heard people say, what do you mean? We lost already on October 7th. To some extent, we did. It was such a disaster. But the issue when you have a war that's being fought in asymmetric conflict against a terrorist entity like Hamas embedded in civilian infrastructure, there's so many complicated variables. The civilian casualties, the civilian infrastructure, the underground network, just everything put together. But then you also have hostages. So you're in a reality that if I told you on October 8th, listen, we're going to win. But winning is going to mean we're going to topple Hamas's regime. They're not going to govern Gaza anymore. But the hostages are going to remain in Gaza. Sorry, we can't get them back. You would say to me, that's not a victory. Someone else might say to me, it is a victory. And then on the flip side, if I said to you on October 8th, listen, we're going to get back all the hostages, but it means that Hamas is still going to be in control of Gaza, and they're still going to have weapons, and they're still going to govern the place. You might say, 1 second, that's not a victory. So we have a situation that there was never a decisive victory here, right? And that's the problem.
No, and the whole total victory slogan didn't really begin until the baseball cap moment. I mean, it was months into the war, right? When it wasn't from the beginning. In the beginning, it was that we have to destroy Hamas. We have to, take away their military capability. They can't rule the strip. Kind of, get the hostages back was a kind of bit of a moving target, how high a priority that was from month to month. Here we are. So I want to kind of move from your comment about transparency into the resignation yesterday of IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi. Lots of heavy weather made about that, and the fact that he apologized to the nation for failing us on October 7th. Herzi Halevi had already announced his intention to resign in June. So he was allowing for transition time for the government to appoint someone to replace him, and also to see to fruition or to closure the hostage return, hopefully. Herzi Halevi has also apologized. He apologized not long after October 7th and took responsibility. What really went on that led to Herzi Halevi's resignation quite suddenly and unexpectedly, I think, yesterday?
Well, I mean, first of all, I need to take issue with something you said, okay?
Please.
Because when I hear from people that somebody took responsibility, you see, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but if somebody takes responsibility, it's not just saying, "Oh, I'm responsible." It's doing something with an action to showcase how you've taken responsibility. And that is something that Herzi Halevi did not do. So when I hear all these people say, "What do you mean I took responsibility?" No, I'm sorry. There's accountability, and personal responsibility means that you are paying a price. And you can say, well, why should he pay a price? He was the chief of staff. And let me tell you, he
Okay,
knew.
but you know you're preaching to the converted on that.
Of course
So
I know. Of course
here,
I know.
yeah, if you're taking exception, it's with the way I chose to articulate
No,
it.
it's with the wording.
I
It's with
agree
wording,
with
but
you.
you're using wording that I use and that everybody's using. I know, but I hear it, and it does. It ignites that. I mean, I know that you agree with me. Herzi had a distinguished career, served this country for 40 years, has a lot of, zchuyot, as we say in Hebrew, deserves a lot of credit and a lot of our gratitude. With that said, he had received intelligence on October 6th. He was on these calls all throughout the night, and he made decisions and gave orders that downplayed the severity of what others thought might be happening. And that led, to an extent, contributed to the scope of the disaster on October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of the misconception of that group in the community of officials and officers, government and military, who for years had pushed the narrative that we can deter Hamas. He was the head of the military intelligence. He was head of Southern Command. He was deputy chief of staff. So it does make sense in a democracy and in a country, especially Israel, where you have a compulsory military service, and we expect our children to go to the army and to trust, as Ben Gurion said, that, and these words, by the way, are etched onto the wall on the 14th floor of the Kiryat military headquarters, in the conference room that is adjacent to the chief of staff's office, to Herzi Halevi's office. Every Jewish mother should know that she has deposited her children in the hands of commanders who are worthy of it. It's in David Ben Gurion quote, and it's on that wall in the Kiryat, in Herzi Halevi's conference room. When your commanders have failed and they do not pay that price, what message are they sending? I am a soldier. I'm an officer. I'm training. I'm looking up to my commanders. I'm saying, one second, if 1,200 people can be massacred on his watch, what happens if I make a mistake? No, I'm sorry. You do have to pay that price. So I actually take issue with the fact that it took this long, to be honest.
So do I.
Now,
why was it? I mean, you know where I'm going.
No, I know. Listen, I'll tell you why it took so long. First of all, I think that
why it took so long. You can tell us why it took so long, but also why it was kind of moved up significantly by several months.
So I think it took this long because I think, to some extent, in the back of his mind, despite the taking, so-called, and I said that in quotation marks, of responsibility back after, pretty much in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, he thought that he could hold on. And he was already making appointments and promoting officers and moving officers and shifting. It seemed like he was going back to normal. And I think that he thought also to some extent that the success that he met, definitely with Hezbollah, with Iran, and to an extent with Hamas, would give him the ability to carry out the remainder of his term. Well, that has changed. And the reason that it changed to a large extent is that Netanyahu and his defense minister, Israel Katz, together with Bezalel Smotrich, have for the most part put a target on the back of Herzi Halevi and made it very clear that they want him out and they're going after him. And either he's going to go out on his own or they're going to push him out and potentially even fire him. And this reality, I think, by the way, here he made a crucial or critical political mistake, is not reading the writing on the wall. And now his resignation looks like, okay, he was pushed out by the political echelon. You know this, Vivian. People in these kind of roles, you want to leave on your own terms. You want to do it your way. I'm not sure that Herzi Halevi is getting that. I think he made a bit of a political rookie mistake, and he should have better friends and better advisors next time. With that said, his resignation will have 3 impacts across the country, I think. First is internally in the IDF, need to pick a new chief of staff, whoever that might be. There's 3 candidates. Okay. Second is going to be, though, on where is the army going, right? What is the army going to look like? And what is, so there's the cultural now, there's the ethos of the army, but also in this fighting spirit. Is this going to be an army that is an offensive army, an army that is not about containment anymore? Or is this, so where are we going? This new chief of staff is going to have to set that tone, together, of course, with the government. But the third impact is politically. And this is why Netanyahu wanted Herzi's scalp to some extent. Because Netanyahu and his cronies want to be able to pin October 7th on the IDF and say, hold on, it was him. It wasn't me. So now with Herzi resigning, that reinforces that. Netanyahu can say, listen, he resigned because he was the guy who messed up. I didn't mess up. They didn't call me. They didn't wake me up in the morning. They didn't tell me it was happening. So why should I resign? And you know what? He resigned because he's the bad guy. So now I'm okay. I can keep going. This is part of the narrative.
I should explode because, that's exactly where I wanted to get to, right? Is when I talked about transparency. Yes, they're all everything you say about Herzi, and he should have gone. My view, call me crazy, is when you wake up on October 8th, there's more than Herzi that should have gone. Okay, when you have a disaster of that scope, and that includes the top dog. Why? People said to me at the time, probably you as well, you can't do it. You can't change horses in the middle of a war. And I'm like, well, first of all, we're just actually starting. And why would you leave in place the directing minds that got you into this mess? And it wasn't like one bad decision. It was years of poor decision-making and hubris. They have the same decision-making capabilities the next day on October 8th. They have the same vested interest, perhaps more. And so that brings up Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. For the Prime Minister of the country to even presume, even if he was right, even if he's 100% correct, he knew nothing, nobody briefed him, he didn't ask any questions, all of which I find difficult to believe, but okay, let's say that's true. He was still the prime minister. And if he didn't, he should have. He's responsible. So for him to start laying things off and pointing fingers, you want to talk about accountability and transparency and integrity. I say it always starts at the top. It starts and stops at the top. And we have a prime minister still who is saying we don't need a state commission of inquiry. The very fact that he'll say that is a very good reason to have one.
Listen, I'm totally with you. We need a state commission of inquiry for multiple reasons. We need one because We have to get to the bottom of what happened. And the prime minister, the buck stops here, and he is the ultimate person responsible. He was also the mastermind and the grand strategist of the
Yeah.
strategy of containment that we used vis-a-vis Gaza. He writes about it in his book. I mean, he himself tells the story of why he decided to hold back so many times on
Yeah, but
go
maybe you and I are the only ones in this country who actually read his book. I don't know.
who it's possible, but he made that very clear, and he was the one who crafted it. We needed to forget about the political sentiment we have towards him. We have to prevent this from happening again. That's the ultimate issue. And
We
and you need an independent
absolutely
commission.
win a war when you have 250 plus civilians, mostly civilians, taken hostage. I mean, it was over. So before we wrap, because we could always do this for hours, but we can't. We have, please, 4 hostages coming out on Saturday, and for the next 5, 6 Saturdays running, we have 3, I think, for a number of weeks after that until the final day when it's supposed to be 12 or 13, all men. Some so-called humanitarian cases, which I would suggest that every single hostage who's still in Gaza is a humanitarian case. Some who we know are ill, and throughout the period, we don't know if and how many will come back not alive. And then we hope that we can move to the next stages and get everyone back. President Trump, forgetting everything that could go wrong here, okay? Between Hamas, between our guys. Number one, I've long held this view, and I hold it even more now after Sunday, is that whatever hell everyone has gone through since October 7th, I feel that it's the warm-up, because I feel that when these hostages come out, what we're going to learn is going to be a really next level, fresh new hell. That's one thing. But we have President Trump saying, I wanted them all out. I don't think this deal's going to work. It's a crappy deal. Does that play into if and what the dynamics may be? Apparently, I'm sure you heard today, Qatar is trying to kickstart the continued negotiations. The parties were supposed to get back to the table 16 days into this ceasefire to discuss the return of the remaining hostages and bodies. And Qatar's trying to kind of giddy up now. That would suggest to me that they're under some pressure from the White House. What do you think, or no?
Well, listen, I think that you're 100% right, that Trump plays the key role here. And if I was being asked by the U.S. administration, what do we have to do to get a second stage to this deal? You got to pressure Israel, and you got to pressure Qatar, and through them Hamas. And you have to use the levers that you have. It's not going to happen just on its own. I think the Americans understand that. I think Trump understands that. It seems that Steve Witkoff, his special envoy to the Middle East, understands that. And I saw somewhere today that he said he's going to be spending more time here, overseeing the implementation and the enforcement of the ceasefire. But that's crucial. And it's needed because Netanyahu will need that extra push across the finish line to do this because of the politics that are involved here. His promises to Smotrich. He's for now kicked that can down the road, but that's coming. In 30-something, 38, 39 days from now, we're going to come to that point that he's going to have to decide, are we going, or are we resuming the war, or are we continuing to a second stage? But also, I mean, the onus is on Hamas, don't get me wrong, right? These are the worst. They're the cynical, barbaric terrorists. We got to get back our people. So I'm hoping that Trump does what's needed here and can help chaperone this deal to the finish line until we get everyone back. I don't see it happening on its own.
Fair enough. Do you think that it's in Hamas's interest to get rid of these hostages already and just kind of finish that part of it? Because they seem to be more inclined to deal. And I don't like to, and I never do, repeat rumors in a podcast, but we have reason to believe that they're prepping other people in a serious way for release, meaning giving them proper food, water, and some sunlight so that
No,
when they release.
listen, I think that their interest here, the hostages are the leverage they have. It's their insurance card. But if they get guarantees from America, for example, and other countries that Israel will not, under no circumstances, resume the war, then that would be enough for them to potentially, say, okay, we'll agree to a deal that sees everybody eventually released. But if they don't get those guarantees, I don't think they're going to release all the hostages. And we're far from being out of the woods, Vivian.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Okay. Well, thank you, Yaakov. We're all going to be on tenterhooks between now and Saturday, and every Saturday. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Same here.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Always great to have you here. And please like us, ring the bell if you're on YouTube. Support us. Algorithms. They need clicks and likes and bells and all that stuff. Okay, see you next time. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftali. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.